Dr. Manmohan Singh is not the man who gave us the reforms of 1991. I would actually call him the man who brought us the crisis of 1991. It is the ruinous policies of Indira Gandhi and Dr. Manmohan Singh that are the root cause of the emergency. When the emergency came, Indira Gandhi said there is a lot of disturbance, disruption in the country. Why is there so much disruption in the country? Because nobody has eaten anything. So they created something called compulsory deposit scheme. So suppose you are getting your salary in your bank account, the government will take one portion of the salary, just take one portion of the salary and put it in compulsory deposit. It is exactly what it sounds like, compulsory deposit. I started laughing when I learned this yesterday. What Kaushik Basu did was he created something new called GEP, not GDP. वो होता है ना डेयरी मिल्क एंड रॉयल मिल्क बिस्किट यू कैन गेट सो उसी नाम से यू कैन फाइंड समथिंग सो ही सेड जीडीपी डज नॉट मैटर आई हैव क्रिएटेड अ न्यू थिंग कॉल्ड जीईपी government economic power and in that ranking he showed that India is now the fifth largest.
So the Modi government, all the long-term administrative and economic decisions that their financial decisions that they've taken, you think that they'll be, where do you see they're taking us in the next, say, 2 decades from now?
And China knows that कि अगर अगले 10 साल में they are not able to stop India, हो सकता है अगले 1000 साल में they will not be able to stop India. Because this is the moment when China is at that position, it's at the second position, it's very high, and India is at the fifth position. If we manage to keep things peaceful and just get to the third position, then they can no longer do anything. Now, in the last 9 years, this has been the most spectacular journey of India since independence. That in the last 9 years, we have climbed 5 ranks. By 26, 27, maybe 28, India should reach the status of third largest economy. Honestly speaking, Arjun ki tarah, my eyes are only on that. We have to reach that third position.
Indian economy is at an exciting stage. PM Modi has said India will be third largest economy during his third term. But Congress's Jairam Ramesh thinks Indian economy will reach that stage irrespective of government in power. But how true or far from truth is that? Hi, I'm Nirva and we have Dr. Abhishek Banerjee, author and columnist, armed with data to tell us what has happened and what to expect.
Hi, Abhishek. Welcome to the pamphlet. We'll be discussing a few your recent column on the Indian economy and the GDP and the entire how things went from bad to worse to better over past few decades. Let's just start very quickly with what you have to say and a bird's eye view, and then we take a few questions, if at all, that we have.
So thank you very much for having me on your show, Nirva. I'm always very excited, very delighted to, talk about the Indian economy, especially because of the fact that, India has become the fifth largest economy. This is, and it sort of bothers me that some people are trying to make light of this achievement as if it's a small thing. So to those people, I just want to say something very simple, that if becoming fifth largest economy was so easy, then why for 41 years, India's economy was going downwards? Everybody should know that in 1950, India was the sixth largest economy in the world. Then in 1991, we had become the 12th largest economy. So for 41 years, we were going backwards. Then we started climbing up after 1991. And then in the next 23 years, we managed to climb just 2 ranks. So we went from 12th position to 10th position. And now in the last 9 years, this has been the most spectacular journey of India since independence. That in the last 9 years, we have climbed 5 ranks. So 41 years, we were going negative. 23 years, we climbed 2 ranks. Now 9 years, we have climbed 5 ranks. And people are saying that in the next 3 years, we'll climb 2 more ranks and we'll reach the third position. This is a very big thing for the country.
Right. So recently you have been questioning the whole idea of giving credit to Dr. Manmohan Singh for the 1991 economic reforms. He was then the, what do you think? Why do you think he should be questioned rather instead of just giving blind credit for the economic reforms?
So I'm very glad that more people are picking it up. Anytime, a small person like me, one handle can affect the discourse, it's an amazing feeling. But this is what I would personally call the biggest piece of fake news in India. The idea that 1991 reforms was something done by Manmohan Singh, or I mean, what do you mean done? If your country is completely bankrupt and then somebody comes with money and says you have two choices, either you can go hungry or you can sign a list of, that you can fulfill my conditionalities and I will give you the money. And that person says, okay, I will not go hungry, I will accept your options. Is that really considered reform? I mean, that's a very strange notion of reform. I mean, so You give credit to somebody who conceptualized the reform, who came up with the idea. No, but he did he come up with the idea? No, he was in a terrible situation, and the thing is, this is well known. So first thing I would show you is that there was even this article. First of all, this has always been well known. Then there is this article in the Indian Express, I believe, around 2010, when it says that many of these documents that were declassified by the World Bank and IMF, they show that all these reforms were forced upon India because India's situation was really bad and nobody was willing to lend us any money. And if you want the money, you have to listen to their conditions. And then a few days back, I also shared on Twitter from the Indian Express archive the front page of the Indian Express, showing that, for a loan, and this was well known even at that time. It's not just that it has come out in of course, declassified documents of the World Bank reveal the extent to which the whole thing was piloted. But even at that time, this was completely well known that the government isn't really doing anything. It's just listening to the orders taken from the World Bank and the IMF. So it came out at the front page of the Indian Express. It says for a $500 million loan, India leaks the budget. India has told disclose the budget in advance to the World Bank and the IMF. And when I put up this screenshot on Twitter, a lot of people came and said, even though it was directly from the Indian Express archive, they said, "Oh, you have faked the screenshot. This is not the font of the Indian Express and whatnot." And you know what happened? Hours later, Prabhu Chawla, who is on Twitter, he personally came and said, "Yes, I have written this article." So I mean, what it tells you is the level to which fake news has been pushed into our veins. The idea that so many people in India actually believe that Manmohan Singh was the father of the 91 reforms, that is the biggest piece of fake news in India. And this belief has gone so deep that if you show them something else, something that used to be on the front page, the top article on Indian Express, they will come and say, "No, this is fake news." And then Prabhu Chawla comes and says, "Yeah, I wrote this." This is not fake news. It is wrong. Everybody knows this. Even if you go back to the time, R.K. Lakshman, legendary cartoonist R.K. Lakshman, he even has a cartoon at that time that shows the IMF standing behind, and Manmohan Singh and Narasimha Rao, they are coming out and their arms are all twisted. And they turn to each other and say, "If anybody asks, we twisted our arms ourselves." So this was totally well known. And I'll tell you where was the first time. And it is very sad that even it took me many years to find out about this fact. And I learned this only this year. Do you know where I learned it? I didn't learn it on some conspiracy but I found it in the economics textbook of NCRT. In that also it is clearly written that the IMF and the World Bank put forward conditionalities. India had to take a loan. We just signed on. Now, of course, IMF they will not send an army into your country. They will not send a navy or an air force to bomb the country and make us accept. Whoever is in charge at that time, he just signed on. So Manmohan Singh just signed the dotted line, and then of course they unleashed a huge PR campaign in the country saying, "No, no, it's not like we could have chosen anything, but then we chose this reforms, and look at all these reforms we gave." So it's that's why I said it's the biggest piece of fake news in India.
Right. So what other roles? He's known as the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister. What other avatars or the roles you've seen him as, and would you like to talk about them?
Yes. So this is the other thing that I want to point out, that not only Dr. Manmohan Singh is not the man who gave us the reforms of 1991. I would actually call him the man who brought us the crisis of 1991. Because in 1991, reformers, we associate the word reform with, young people. Dr. Singh was 60 years old in 1991. He did not come up with the idea of reform. He was embedded in the Indian financial system, in directing everything that was going on in government for decades. And if you look at that career, you will understand why I said that Dr. Manmohan Singh brought us the crisis of 1991. He is the man who created the worst forms of Nehruvian socialism in India. So what happened? The 1970s were the worst decade for India's economy. And at that time, who was the chief economic advisor? It was actually Dr. Manmohan Singh from 1972 to 1976. Indira Gandhi's hard left turn, the period when she turned our economy into absolute ruin. At that time, Manmohan Singh was the chief economic advisor. The other day, I put out a tweet in which I put out the highlights of what happened under Dr. Singh's tenure as the chief economic advisor. So, because the country was failing all around, every day they would come up with a new enemy. So as usual, the first thing they said was, this happens a couple of years before Manmohan Singh. So the first thing Indira Gandhi comes and says is that, "Oh, nobody has any money because the banks have stolen everything." So in 1969, she nationalizes all the banks. This was the first thing she does. Then 1971, Manmohan Singh comes in as economic advisor. In 1972, he gets promoted to chief economic advisor. But the country is still failing. You seized all the banks, but the country is still failing. Then the next obvious thing is, oh, nobody has any money because the rich people have taken all the money. The typical, socialist or 70s Bollywood movie style. So rich people took all the money. So they said, okay, raise the top tax rate to 98%. Now we'll teach the rich a lesson. Still the country is failing. They said, okay, the rich people, the banks, okay, fine. This time the middle class people are the enemy. That is why everybody is so poor. So they created something called compulsory deposit scheme. So suppose you are getting your salary in your bank account, the government will take one portion of the salary, just take one portion of the salary and put it in compulsory deposit. It is exactly what it sounds like, compulsory deposit. So every month you get your salary, you take a portion, and it is not a tax. The government will just take that money, compulsory, and it's for like it will get locked in for a period of like 10 years or something. So you cannot touch your salary. You are earning your money, government just takes a portion and says, no, this is locked in. This is now my money. And you'll get it back after 10 years. So that compulsory deposit. Then in 1974, they come up with something called Foreign Exchange Regulation Act. They said, why is India still poor? It's because of all these foreign investors. If we crack the whip on all these foreign investors, then our country will become rich. Of course, that does not work. Still, everybody is hungry. Nobody has any money. Then they come up with the idea that, why nobody has any food? The reason is the wheat traders. The wheat traders have hidden all the wheat. So the government comes and seizes the entire wheat supply. Still nothing is happening. GDP growth is at 1%. Inflation is at 28%. Everybody is protesting on the streets because everybody is hungry. If you don't eat for 3 days, you will be angry, no? And very hungry. So then what is the solution? Emergency. So this is the sequence of events. It is the ruinous policies of Indira Gandhi and Dr. Manmohan Singh that are the root cause of the emergency. When the emergency came, Indira Gandhi said there is a lot of disturbance, disruption in the country. Why is there so much disruption in the country? Because nobody has eaten anything. Inflation is at 28%. Today, inflation is at 6-7%, and people are shouting so much Mahanga is there. During UPA, inflation went to 10%, and you saw the condition, how angry people were. Now imagine inflation was 28% and GDP growth was 1%. If everybody is hungry, of course they are protesting on the streets. That is why Indira Gandhi had to bring the emergency. So the root cause for India's failure as an economy, the root cause of the emergency is the policies of Indira Gandhi and Dr. Manmohan Singh. And everybody needs to know this. So he is the man whose policies have brought us the crisis of 91. He didn't give us the reforms, he gave us the crisis.
Right. Okay, I'll ask again. Do you think the Congress started distancing itself from the 1991 economic reforms by mid-90s itself?
So that period, that was obviously a period of upheaval. And after that, they lost power also. You have to remember that political parties look at everything from the perspective of power. Right. So after 91, they did reforms. It did good for the country. But what did it do for the Congress? Within 5 years, they were out of power. And that was, for the Congress, that was the longest period that they were really out of power, from 1996 to 2004. For a party that has been so close to power, almost uninterrupted, it was a very, very long and difficult period. So even by 2004, when they came back to power, their first instinct was actually to go towards the hard left. And this was there all throughout the campaign of 2004. So if you remember correctly, this idea that this has reforms have happened, but Aam Aadmi ko kya mila? This is the standard hard left rhetoric. And then they came to power explicitly with the support of the Communist Party as well, right? So the Congress Party had always, because if you look at the thing from their perspective, as long as there were no reforms, they were doing extremely well. The moment reforms happened, after that, their record is really terrible. No Gandhi dynasty person has become prime minister since then. We just look at the whole thing from their perspective. The 41 years from 1950 to 91, India became 3 times poorer. And I want to tell this to every single person. In 1950, an average Indian's per capita GDP was 18% of the world average. By 1992, it had become 6%. So from 18%, we went to 6%. So 3 times poorer we became. But so what? We look at it from the point of view of the Congress. They held power for all but 3 years. They were continuously in power. And now, from that 6% of 1991, we have actually come back to 19% now. 2014 was 14%. Now it's 19. Now it's 19%. So we have come back in this V shape that I like to talk about. So 50 was we were sitting at 18%. 91 we came to 6%. Now we are at 19%. But after 1991, you see, in the last 25 years, it is 15 years BJP and 10 years Congress.
Yeah. So,
So if you are in the Congress, what would you want?
right, but so Congress, so when the Vajpayee government, when they offered and when they suggested the economic reforms, do you think Congress neglected those economic reforms, very categorically?
What I would say is they took a lot of advantage from Vajpayee's reforms. That is how we got those high UPA 1 era growth rates. And in the but in the UPA 2, they did not carry on any of those reforms, right? So they let those reforms go stale. And in fact, this should be pointed out. In the UPA 1 years, India's total GDP, nominal GDP, it expanded 89%, which is very high. But in the UPA 2 years, it only expanded 52%. Now, how much is that? 52% good or bad? You realize that 52% is actually below the 55% that happened in the Vajpayee years, when we were actually facing sanctions. So by UPA 2, because there was no reform done, there was no attention paid to the economy, even though the global situation was extremely favorable. Despite that, in that 1 decade, the the momentum that had been created by Vajpayee's reforms ran out. And people always talk about the higher GDP growth between 2004 and 2014, but that's actually a myth. Because suppose I'm batting, right? It depends on which pitch you are batting on. Is it a flat pitch or is it a bouncy pitch? That is what decides what is the scores. Yes, we had more GDP growth, but do you know that every country surpassed us at that time? Brazil, Russia, India, China, right? They used to talk about BRIC countries. India's economy was bigger than Brazil and Russia when Congress came to power in 2004. By 2014, Brazil and Russia had both crossed us. So yes, we were getting high growth, but we were getting the lowest among the high growth. So everybody else was crossing us. Then what is the gap between when they came to power in 2004? The gap between India's GDP and China's GDP was just 1 trillion. By 2014, it had become 8 trillion. So by the time we had increased our GDP a little over 2 times, China increased its GDP 5 times. This was the best period of growth in the global economy in many, many decades. It was the easiest time, and everybody crossed us. So when they came to power, India was in the 12th position. India was the 12th largest economy. Brazil was the 13th or 14th largest economy. By 2014, we had gone from 12 to 10, but Brazil had gone from 13 to 7. When they came to power, Russia was only in 16th position. Russia was almost at the bottom of the table. But in 2004, by 2014, Russia had gone to 9th position. But we were only in 10th position.
Right.
But now, if you see today, our economy is actually almost twice as that of Brazil or Russia. So you see the difference that has happened in the last 9 years. And I'll tell you this: during the Modi years, it's the first time, possibly, when India has actually, at least as a percentage, has kept up pace with China. China's economy has expanded 84%. India's economy has expanded 83%, which is basically the same thing. So at least we didn't fall behind further. What happened was, the reason India fell behind China is because in those UPA years, India was growing fast, but everybody was growing fast. It's a flat pitch where everybody is scoring centuries. So if you score century, the other guy scores a triple century, then you're going to lose the game, right? So this cheating that is done, that is, they constantly say, oh, look, the GDP expanded more in the UPA years. This is like saying, Nirva, I always give the example that saying that, oh, India has scored 250 runs in this game. Last game, they scored 300 runs, huh? So they did better. I said, wait. But who won that game? What did the other team score? I said, no, the other team ka score nahi pata. No, I'll not. So can you imagine reporting a cricket match like this, where you will not report what the other guy has scored? So everybody else scored much more.
Right.
Because the pitch was clear.
And the UPA had the NSE, right? The Sonia Gandhi led NSE, which was giving the advice. Do you think that had any role to play in the stagnation? Obviously the NSE members were quite leftist themselves.
Hardcore. To this extent, now, I always feel that to some extent we are a little, in fact, I would say we are always a little unfair to Sonia Gandhi and always a little too fair to Manmohan Singh. Prime Minister kaun tha? Prime Minister was Manmohan Singh. Na? And I gave you the example of how since 70s this man has been part of the worst hard left policies of the government. So even I would say even that is a myth. That idea that only NSE is making all the decisions. Arey, you are the Prime Minister, you make the decisions. If you cannot make the decisions, you step aside. You go out and resign. Who is stopping you? You want the power and you will not take responsibility. And it's not just the NSE, I'm telling you. Today also I was reading an interview of Kaushik Basu given in 2012, where Kaushik Basu said that if we get 6% growth and 10% inflation, that is not stagflation. That is fantastic growth. People should actually go back and read the interviews and the pronouncements of Chief Economic Advisor Kaushik Basu. Kaushik Basu was not in the National Advisory Council. Kaushik Basu, Raghuram Rajan, they were talking absolute nonsense at the time. So because India's economic rank was not improving, I started laughing when I learned this yesterday. What Kaushik Basu did was he created something new called GEP, not GDP. वो होता है ना dairy milk and royal milk biscuit you can get, so उसी नाम से you can find something. So he said GDP does not matter. I have created a new thing called GEP, government economic power, and in that ranking he showed that India is now the fifth largest. See, magic. You get your own advisor to create a new ranking. So मैंने बोला, if you cannot make it in the IIT exam, here is a life hack. Create your own ranking and top it. So what is the difference between the GDP ranking and the GEP ranking? The ranks are exactly the same, except India has magically gone from 10th position to 5th position.
Right.
So make your own ranking and top it.
Right. So you recently and you've also quite often talked about the NPS during the UPA era, right? What's your opinion? You think the nationalization of banks by Indira Gandhi uh, that has had any role in the crisis, or was it just the very badly handled and mishandled central bank authorities?
देखिए, NPA crisis, I would see some people, if you take a very long view on things, you can say that, the government took over the banks and it then ran them into the ground. And that would be a legitimate view on a very long scale because, it's almost 50 years gap. That if they were, because, if they were private banks, probably they would have managed their NPAs better. But again, this is the thing about, you cannot, make an excuse for what was Dr. Manmohan Singh doing when these NPAs were mounting. And at that time, even Economist magazine, in only May it has published this article, and we all know Economist magazine does not like Modi government one bit. And even they said clearly that in the early 2010s, the Indian banks were reporting profits, but this on paper, which looked big on paper, but they were essentially unbelievable because it's not matching with what we are seeing on the real economy. And that is why in 2013, Manmohan Singh brings in Raghuram Rajan to take a look at what is going on in the banks. And what does Raghuram Rajan find? If you see the profits of the banks, they are increasing till 2012-13. Then suddenly in 2013-14, the profits of the public sector banks take a huge hit. This is not 2014. This is 2013-14, fiscal year 14. That is ending in March 2014. So this is the last year of UPA government. In that, the profits start collapsing. And then year after year, they start collapsing. Why did this change happen in 2013? Because that's when Raghuram Rajan says, yeah, we are hearing that a lot of profit is happening, but show me your account books. I want to see what is actually inside. And the moment the account books are opened, the profit starts crashing because there was no profit, right? It was all accounting tricks. And so the NPS, they start mounting, and then Raghuram Rajan and the government, they start something called an AQR, asset quality review. That, I actually want to see what is the quality of these assets that you are claiming. And the results of the AQR were shocking. Out of 21 public sector banks, 11 of them had to be put in what RBI called prompt corrective action. Now, simply from the term, you can realize, suppose you go to your doctor, Nirva, and your doctor says, Nirva, your health needs prompt corrective action. Will you be scared? Of course, you will be scared. That means you are in really, really bad situation, right? So 11 out of 21 public sector banks had to be placed in prompt corrective action because their condition was so bad. Now, imagine if these 11 banks had failed. What would have happened to the country if these 11 banks had failed? Where would the country be? But that problem has been solved. And now, if you see the condition of the public sector banks, they are having the best time of their lives. So, in the last fiscal, they reported a total profit of 1,04,000 crore. In the fiscal before that, they reported profit of, I believe, 66,000 crore. So that is already 1,70,000 crore. Now the Q1, the first quarter results have come out. I was just looking at them. In the first quarter, the total profit is already 35,000 crore, which is actually twice as much of the 16,000 crore reported in the same quarter last year. So public sector banks are doing extremely well. That entire NPA mess that was created. So you can imagine. So we went from a situation where 11 out of 21 banks had to be put in prompt corrective action, to a situation where the public sector banks is just growing like gangbusters. At this point, the numbers are just they're doing so well. SBI is the largest lender, and its profit is up of 178%. Now, a result of 178% speaks for itself. And now, of course, now that everything has changed, there is now that slogan of save SBI. So, January, February, they were saying, oh my God, government has destroyed SBI. It's destroyed SBI. Their profit is up 178%. What are you saying?
Right, right. So, how do you see the NDA government's handling of the Indian economy? We've seen the pandemic situation. The world economy has been, taken a setback. There have been major crisis including in countries which are developed countries, right? India is
Yes.
now a newly developed nation, as we say. How do you see the NDA government handling the economy, especially in the pandemic?
So for me, the biggest headline will always be the fact that we jumped from 10th position to 5th position in 9 years. This is the best performance of any decade that we have ever had since independence. By far, there's no comparison to anything else. But yes, and now coming to the pandemic, you might remember that at the time of the pandemic, a lot of these big brain economists, including the great Raghuram Rajan, they said that, go on, spend like crazy. But that did not happen. We have kept, stopped we did not give in to the temptation to give a huge fiscal stimulus. Now, these huge fiscal stimulus, that was given in the West. And if you look at it, if you compare, the results are absolutely astounding. Yes, they gave stimulus, they got high growth, but we got even higher growth, so it doesn't matter. But that high growth was for only 1 year, right? In 2021, they got a very high growth. But immediately in 2022 and so on, now the growth rates have crashed. But inflation has peaked. So by giving that stimulus, they got low growth and high inflation. We did not give the stimulus. We got high growth and low inflation. So, it's like we won both. We got the high growth and we got the low inflation. They gave lots of stimulus. So what would have happened? I'm really scared to imagine what would have happened if we had listened to these Raghuram Rajan people and all, And so because America, in a country like the US, that US dollar is the strongest, most powerful currency in the world, right? In the US, if inflation can hit 9%, America can just keep printing dollars. Dollar value will always be $1. Can we do the same with rupee? Can we just start printing rupees? No, then the value of rupees will disappear completely. So if in a country like America, inflation can reach 9%, the pound currency, I think it has been around for 1,000 years. And at one point, Britain's inflation had gone to 11%. So if these countries with their 1,000-year currencies, if they were facing 9 to 11% inflation, can you imagine what would have happened if we had started printing rupees like Raghuram Rajan wanted us to? We would have crossed Manmohan Singh's achievement of 28% inflation. We would have crossed his target. Yes, we would definitely cross the world record of inflation. We would have become like Turkey, 80% inflation. That is what we would have right. So, and by the way, people should definitely look this up. There is also another pronouncement from Kaushik Basu in 2011 saying that Turkey's inflation model is a great idea for the world. We should all investigate it. 80% inflation, that's the benchmark. So,
yeah, face palm. So, the Modi government, all the long-term administrative and economic decisions financial decisions that they've taken, you think that where do you see they're taking us in the next, say, 2 decades from now?
2 decades is always too long, I would say. In fact, even 5-year horizon is too long. I mean, who could have predicted pandemic, Ukraine war? We don't know. So if you ask me personally, I will, my eyes are always on the short-term goal, which is that 3 to 4 years by 26, 27, maybe 28, India should reach the status of third largest economy. Honestly speaking, Arjun ki tarah, my eyes are only on that. We have to reach that third position. Of course, there is a lot left to be done. And people say, our per capita GDP is low. Yes, very low. So next thing, because after that, crossing either US or China, that's a big dream. Somebody says 2070, somebody says 2080. Now nobody knows what will happen by 2070. Okay. Next thing is, so nations, they develop in stages, right? So Modi government, if it gets re-elected in 2024, they will be the government that brought us to the third position. Now, there is another thing. There are other measures of greatness. There will be other great prime ministers. This nation is full of promise. I hope there will be other great prime ministers who will come along. जिस तरह से we have climbed up to the nominal GDP and reached the number 3 position, उसी तरह we will someday we have to climb the per capita GDP. उसमें भी हम लोगों को number 1 बनना है. For that, I'm sure there will be some other great prime minister who will come along. This nation is full of talent, full of power, full of hope.
Right. And just to end it, how do you see the leaps and bounds, the growth we've seen in Indian economy in past 9-10 years now? How do you see that as a in geopolitical scenario in the current economic run that India is having? We obviously are also a threat to a lot of countries, which is also quite visible by the statements a lot of people give. So how do you see that, the geopolitical situation of Indian economic run?
So obviously, right now, I mean, China is the big threat across the world. And I personally believe that the next decade is extremely crucial because, see, what happens is, I mean, nowadays, more than military, it is the economic power that matters, right? Right now, there is still a very big gap between India and China, right? India is still in that fifth position or so to say. Over the next decade, we'll probably make it to the third position. See, and once you reach the position of third largest economy, and you embed yourself in a whole bunch of supply chains, including things like semiconductors, it becomes very difficult for any modern nation to intimidate another guy militarily. Because if your market is so big, if your economy is so large and powerful, and this can happen within the next decade. So China के point of view से, this is their best moment. This is the best. These are the last few years in which they can have leverage over India. Because if we stay the course, and if we make it to that third position, if we enter those semiconductor supply chains, if we get these things done over the next 10 decades, within 10 years, so within 10 years, it will be impossible for China to intimidate us. And China knows that. कि अगर अगले 10 साल में they are not able to stop India, हो सकता है अगले 1000 साल में they will not be able to stop India. Because this is the moment when China is at that position, it's at the second position, it's very high, and India is at the fifth position. If we manage to keep things peaceful and just get to the third position, then they can no longer do anything. Because that is the point at which China will hurt itself more by attacking us than hurting us. So that is why China is very desperate to get something done in these 10 years. Because if they cannot do something in these 10 years, they'll never be able. Nobody knows when they will ever be able to begin. Maybe 1000 साल लग जाएंगे वापस से.
Let's see how things go. The political environment is heating up, and let's see how the election year goes and what 2024 brings us. But thank you so much for joining us, Abhishek, and hopefully I'll see you soon, sooner than we know. All right, I'll
Oh,
just